Good evening, viewers, and welcome again to Discovering Truth. And I am Pastor Forbes from the Gateway in Abiding Word Ministries here in the Gambia. This is going to be the second part of what I suspect will end up being a four-part series on two building blocks that I think are critical and crucial for any foundation to be proper, to be stable, to be solid. And by foundation, I'm not just thinking in terms of construction of infrastructure, as I am thinking of construction of a national identity, a nation's pride, a family's strength, and along those lines. So I'm really talking about people and the bigger people being the one whole unit called the Gambia, or as we like to call it, the new Gambia. I believe that there are many things that can come to play and bring to bear upon making a solid foundation for national cohesiveness and for a forward-thinking and pragmatic nation moving into prosperity with a sense of posterity and legacy in its mind. And there are many we could think of, at least 10, but there are two I want to start off with, and those two are the two I started with last week. And one was truth, and the other was transparency. So we are dealing with truth and transparency part 2. And we will not go so much into depth with the definitions, but what I tried to do last week was to describe them from the opposites. When something is not true, it is a lie, it is an untruth. And truth has a way of liberating. Truth has a way of freeing you. Truth makes you happy. Truth is a win-win formula for everybody wherever they are. Truth gives you dignity. Truth gives you courage. Truth is empowerment. Truth makes people love and respect you. Truth will make your children think good about you. Transparency, which is the other word, the easiest way to describe it, as I did last week, was to say that when something is not transparent, it is opaque, it is dark. Transparent means you can see through. It's like white glass. You know exactly what you see on one side is what you see on the other side. Transparency is like that plastic film that we used to use many years ago in workshops, when you can use a marker and draw on it and put it on a machine and it magnifies it on a screen or on a white wall. That plastic is known as a transparency. It's like the plastic that we used to laminate aliens card and the old ID card. You can see through. It doesn't change anything. And we are saying that to build a nation, albeit the new Gambia, to build a family, to build our children, to build families, to build our big men tomorrow globally, we need two things which are fundamental to us. We need truth as a guiding pillar, as a fundamental, pivotal, non-negotiable building block, as well as transparency. And we said that Jesus Christ put it this way, that when you know the truth that you know makes you free. There is a couple of translations in the Bible say set you free, but the original says make you free. So truth liberates. Truth, it removes the shackle of falsehood, of bondage, of fear, of intimidation from you, because you have nothing to be afraid of when truth is part of your culture, when truth is your raison d'etre, when truth is your life. Also when you are transparent. Last week we said that sometimes when you meet people and they introduce people to you, sometimes you hear this phrase, what you see is what you get. What that means is that that woman, that man, that institution, there's nothing hidden, there's nothing underground, there's nothing opaque, there's nothing non-transparent about it. It's just true. In other words, you do not have to even second guess them when they say good morning. You want to look up and see whether the sun is up or not, because they have a track record of not being transparent, of not speaking the truth. When they give you a document to sign, you are signing it because you know they are transparent. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is couched in fine print, small letters to catch you. And for a minute or so, if you think of a world if you think of a family, an institution, a school, a government, if you think of public procurement policies, if you think of tender boards where there is truth and transparency, life would be a win-win for everybody. As I said last week again, when people go to court, I find that very interesting. People go to court and every witness swears or affirms by a holy book that they believe in. And the words go something like this: I affirm or I swear that the evidence that I shall give here shall be the truth, 1, the whole truth, 2, and nothing but the truth. But the case goes on for 15 years. So if everybody is speaking the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the conclusions will be arrived at easily. But alas, I'm sure you know that that is, as they say in English, observed more in the breach than in the compliance. I want to read for us tonight 3 statements. I have a lot of scriptures from the Bible I want to share with you because that's my resource of truth and reality and faith and practice, and I recommend it to you wherever you are, whatever you believe in. John's Gospel, one of the 4 Gospels in the Bible, the Injil, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as I always like to remind us, and they are all 4 angles. It's like having a photograph, or it's like maybe I am speaking to you and there are 4 cameras. There's a camera on my left, on my right, in the front, at the back. What the one in the left cannot show you, the one on the right will show you. What the one on the back cannot show you, the one in the front will show you. But it's the same me. And so the 4 Gospels are like that. There are 4, if you like, camera angular positions and witness accounts of the life of Jesus Christ. And in John's Gospel, in chapter 14, in verse 30, John's Gospel, chapter 14, verse 30, Jesus Christ makes this statement. I will take it from verse 29. It says, and now I have told you before it happens, so that when it does happen, you may believe. And this is verse 30. I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world, by that he meant Satan, for the ruler of this world is coming, and he has nothing in me. In other words, I am full of truth. Truth lives in me, and I am transparent. The ruler of this world is coming. He has nothing in me. He can try me from the left, from the right. He can try me on top and bottom. He can try me in every court of the world, in every tribunal and every arbitration method. He can use all the witnesses he has, but he has nothing in me. That is living a life of truth and living a life of transparency. And it is a life that we must encourage from childhood, from children to learn to say the truth and learn to be transparent. People think by being opaque is a style. You know, the shadier you are, the smarter you are. But today we live in a country where almost 4 or 5 days a week, we are fed on television on commissions of inquiry. And what seemed to have been opaque for probably 2 decades is now open, because there is nothing you can hide that will not come. Jesus Christ also said, there is nothing that is hidden that will not be revealed. It is a matter of time. It comes out. Truth is like the resurrection and the death of Jesus Christ. You bury him one day, and on the 3rd day he rises up. You cannot hold truth, because truth is an authority. Truth is power. Truth is the authority of conscience, if you like. Somebody wakes up one day and decides, look, I need to make peace with my conscience. I can't sleep. I need to speak the truth. You wonder why sometimes people wait till their latter years and they write their memoirs. And when you read their memoirs, you're surprised at all the things that are coming out. Because after some time, truth wins. 2 weeks ago, the world was celebrating the assassination of, as it were, the death of Dr. Martin Luther King. And somewhere out of the blue, a so-called suicide note that was constructed by security came out. Now, that was constructed maybe 50 and a half years ago. 50 years is half a century, but truth always comes out. And rather than waiting for half a century, it's just good to live the life, because I suspect medical people probably would agree with me that truth and falsehood, especially falsehood and an opaque life, have a bear on your body, on your life, on the stress of your mind. You are always trying to remember what you said, where you said it, because you told a lie. So you have to cover that lie and remember what you said to who, so that you do not say something that goes against the lie that you said. And so your mind is working overtime. You are stressed. Your muscles are working overtime. Meanwhile, if you speak the truth, you have nothing to be afraid of. My late maternal grandmother used to tell us this when we were children. She said, "Speak the truth and let the devil be ashamed." And as funny as it was to us, we all grew up with it. We're over 50 now, I still remember it. Speak the truth and let the devil be ashamed. What that means is that every place where they try to say things about you, when truth comes out, it has a way of disarming. People can tell that this is the truth. What that person said is not the truth, it's a lie. So Jesus Christ says, the ruler of this world is coming. He's coming to make his demands, but he has nothing in me. We are not in collusion. We are not in partnership. He doesn't talk my talk. I don't walk his walk. We are opposite parallel lines. We are going in two different directions. We do not meet. Satan cannot say to me that this is mine, because I live in truth and I live in transparency, or rather, to be more succinct, truth and transparency reside in Jesus. The second scripture I want to take you to is the third book of the New Testament of the Bible. So the four Gospels are Matthew's Gospel, Mark's Gospel, Luke's Gospel. Luke was a physician, a doctor, and John's Gospel. John and Matthew were disciples. And in Luke's Gospel, in chapter 23, at the trial of Jesus Christ before Pilate and Caiaphas, this mock kangaroo court that they told all kinds of lies about him, that the scriptures say that no two witnesses agreed on even one thing that they said. They were just trying to frame things against him. And you see that today, and you think it started today. It started right in his time, because when people collude with evil, they want to see what they can do so that they can bring people down. And when they had done all these things and spoken against Jesus and said so many things, and the Bible says no two witnesses corroborated themselves. When they finished, these are the words of Pilate. Pilate was the governor of that time. And he says in Luke's Gospel, chapter 23 and verse 4, I read, "So Pilate said to the chief priests and to the crowd and the chief priests who concocted this lie against Jesus, to the point that they freed a criminal who they had sentenced to death maybe a week or two prior. But they were ready to release him quickly so that they could crucify this Jesus. When they brought their case before Pilate, this is what Pilate said: I find no fault in this man. He has done nothing wrong. Everything you are saying does not add up, and what he's saying doesn't bring any culpability in his life. I find no fault in this man. Some translations will say, I find nothing worthy of a conviction. When you live a life of truth, that is how it would happen. That is how it must happen. I find no fault in him. He himself said, the ruler and the prince of this world is coming, but he has nothing in me. He can talk, he can write, he can put it Facebook, he can put it social media, he can concoct it, he can swear to a deposition, but he has nothing in me. And when Jesus was taken before the people who were trying him, the chief man said, I find no fault in him. So that agrees to what Jesus Christ, our Savior and the Messiah himself said. And when you live like that, when we live like that, ladies and gentlemen, again, can you imagine a nation, a school, a religious institution, a family where they live in truth? They just live in truth. They don't have to embellish anything they're saying. They don't have to sit down and scheme that I will say this and you will say that, because somebody's going to forget, as always happens. And sometimes when you go to a court of law or sometimes in a tribunal or some situation, when you hear people talk, sometimes it even becomes laughable, because they have to remind the person that, look, you are on oath. remember you are on oath, because they can tell that what you are saying is not true. It's the same thing when you watch, sometimes there's this, I've watched this TV series, sometimes it's called Border Security. I watched the ones in Australia, in Canada, in the United States, when people maybe travel and they have contraband in their suitcases, or they have things on them, and then they are picked out by the customs or the border security people, and they ask them a question, and sometimes you find that at immigration too. These people are trained to ask you the same question in 5 different ways, maybe in a space of 20 minutes, and some people give 5 different answers. There are people who are maybe caught and their names change as the questions change, their dates of birth change, and this is not fear and shock, it's just because they were not speaking the truth. And people who are trained in psychology sometimes can look at your body and they can tell you are twitching, they can tell the lines are coming here, and they can tell that you are not telling the truth, even before a polygraph test comes to you or a lie detector. Why go through all that when you can easily say the truth? And ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the truth is, I was wrong. Sometimes the truth is, I am sorry. Sometimes the truth is, Balalenma. And it frees you, because when you don't go in that way of truth, you have to tell stories, and somewhere along the line, you're going to forget, you are going to lie. And then when they replay for you everything, you wonder. There's nothing like truth. Back to what Jesus Christ said, when you know the truth will set you free. And he, she, that person that the Son of God has set free is free indeed, in reality, manifestedly, practicably free. Nothing to worry about. I remember when I was a young boy many years ago, there was a situation which was very close to our family, and somebody close to us was seemingly being indicted for something. And I remember being told that when they went for this meeting, people were raising their eyebrows because they expected better from this person that had seemingly taken this money. And after everybody had spoken, the person was now given the chance to speak. And when the person spoke, everybody just bowed their head. And later, at the end of that meeting, 2 or 3 people called the person and said, we always knew that your integrity was intact, so we waited to hear you. And that's the joy of truth. So when people are jumping, hewing and crying and talking, you just wait until they have finished, because when you speak, the truth comes out. That is why, when people report a scenario, when people report something, maybe they write letters and they report to the board, they report, most times it has turned out in life that the first person to report tends to be the person who was wrong, because they don't even tell you what they did in that scenario. They are quick to jump. And if you are not somebody well-versed in management, in administration, and you are not using the principles of wisdom, you'll jump because somebody's urgency makes you feel urgent. But if you tell them to calm down and invite the other party that they are talking about to that same meeting and hear that other party's position, you may discover that maybe one was lying, or sometimes it's even a perspective issue. Like we say, each coin you see, any coin you hold in your hand, has 3 sides. Most times we say 2 sides. It's not 2 sides. It has this side, that side, and if you stand it on a table, it has a side that makes it stand. And so sometimes it's a perspective issue. So people who sometimes jump to conclusion. I remember many, many years ago in our church, I've never forgotten that the little girls, the children would always run to me, Pastor, Pastor, and they reported a boy to me. And the pastor said the boy said he was going to beat this girl, and all the girls ran and came and told me, Pastor, this boy said he's going to beat the girl. And they were waiting for me, and I said to them, so he was just standing and he said he was going to beat her. And one of the girls said, no, she said he has a big head. Then I said, aha. It is what she told him that made him respond. But when they came to report the case, they never told me that she taunted him for what to her was his big head. That is what can happen when we do not live for truth. So truth is not truth because somebody reports. Truth is not truth because somebody cries when they are reporting. Truth is not truth because somebody rolls on the floor while he's telling the story and he's beating his hand all over this place and it's like he's gasping for breath. Truth is truth, and when you listen to it, you can tell. So Jesus Christ said, Satan has nothing in me. I do not collude with him. Pilate said of Jesus, I have no fault, and I find no fault in this man. Let's look at the third example from the 5th book of the New Testament. So we've done Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. The 5th book is the Acts of the Apostle, and the person we're looking at is Paul. Paul started by fighting the gospel and ended up writing 2/3 of the Bible. That is what can happen when you surrender your life to Jesus Christ as your Messiah, your Savior, and your personal Lord. Now we go to Acts chapter 23. Acts has 28 chapters, so 23, and I'm reading verse 1. Paul was being tried, and people were saying things about him. But the good thing about the fair play of our world, if we want to do that, is always to give the accused person a fair hearing and a chance to speak. And I believe we have a principle that everybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty, not until suspected, until proven guilty. So everybody must be assumed innocent until they can be proven as guilty. So Paul was in such a situation, the Apostle Paul, and he says in chapter 23, verse 1, Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, Men and brethren, my brothers, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. That is quite an audacious statement to make, but he didn't lie. And if you follow what ensues from verse 2 down, he defended his cause, defended his faith, defended his mission, his calling. But he started by saying, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. I remember telling you that there are 7 principles of authority. I can't remember all of them, but I know the first one is the imperial authority, the authority of God, the final authority. Then there is the authority of truth, is the next highest level. And then there is the authority of conscience. And that's what he's saying here. I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. You know, you can get into serious legal trouble if you violate somebody's conscience, if you offend their conscience. There are people today who are called prisoners of conscience. So people have a right to their conscience. And then as we go down, there are authorities of customs and tradition, delegative authority, and all that. But the first 3 highest levels are God's imperial authority, the authority of truth, and then the authority of conscience. That is why your conscience can either condemn you or excuse you. But if your conscience gets to that part where in the biblical phrase it's been seared or roasted with hot iron, then you lose your conscience. You just do anything that is unimaginable, like wanting to have 400 plots of land by yourself alone. And those are things that worry people. What kind of conscience do you have if somebody wants to loot everything, or somebody wants to have 300 pairs of shoes, or somebody wants to use the state's coffers to repair their private residence? Then you start wondering. So transparency and truth also come into conscience. And ladies and gentlemen, I will take these 3 scriptures and spread them as we get into part 3. But suffice to say, if our lives are going to be what they should be, and if you and I are going to walk tall wherever we are in this world, and you travel, when you get to, when you deplane and you're walking towards immigration, you are not shaking. You are not wondering what's going to happen because you told a lie. You know, when you have cleared that and you are going through security for your luggage, you are not shaking. When you are called for an interview, you are not shaking. When you are going to the embassy, you are not shaking. When you are called to answer a question, you are not shaking. If the board calls you, you are not shaking. If a little panel is set to ask you questions, you are not shaking because you've lived in good conscience. In good conscience. Obviously, there is bad conscience too, but we've made allusions to that. We'll continue on that in a lesser form because we want to talk about the positives. Let us live in such a way that we can say like Jesus, the Prince of the world cometh, he has nothing in me. Let us live in such a way that when we meet the pilots of this world, because people have dragged us there and are shouting and crying, and the pilots can say, I find no fault in her, I find no fault in him. And finally, let's be able to defend ourselves that, check me, I have lived in all good conscience before God until today. Now, what those three things do not mean, they do not mean that when people have their evil intention against you, they are going to excuse you. Because you can sometimes be in places where somebody is telling the truth, but people nail them for speaking the truth. That we will also explore, but our time is up. And until I come your way next week, by the grace of God, with part 3, this is Pastor Forbes saying, have a good evening. May God bless us all. God keep our nation, and may we live with truth and transparency in all we do. Have a good evening and good night.